Good morning and welcome to the session, Core Public Trust and Confidence. I am Ellen Procida. I'm right here from the New Jersey courts. This is being live streamed today, so during the session, if you have any questions or comments, I'll run the mic to you so that our folks that are joining us in the virtual space can also enjoy and learn from your feedback. Our presenter today, Amy Chack, is also from the New Jersey courts, although she has also worked in the Arizona Judiciary. Do we have any Arizona folks in the room? Woo! Her experience spans several different divisions: civil, criminal, municipal for the trial divisions, and probation division. Amidst all that experience, though, I think what's most important to share is Amy's passion for courts that are fair, efficient, and accessible. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Amy.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out on this very cloudy Tuesday morning. Let's pray that the snow holds off until we can all safely get home to this afternoon. But welcome to one of the core modules in the core public trust and confidence discussions. We're going to be talking a little bit today about public trust and confidence, and this is one of the modules in the Core Champion Achievement Program, and you've heard about this all throughout the past 2 days. So this is one of the modules that you can go on the app and you can actually fill out the form and get credit for. But this is actually a really important topic, and I think it's pretty timely. I don't know how many of you watched the news, but the Judiciary was again on the news this morning, right? And talking about potential Supreme Court decisions and how that's going to affect other branches of government. So I think that this is a really timely topic and a subject matter that is really core to our foundation as judiciary leaders. So this public trust and confidence is part of the principal module. So it builds that framework for strong leaders and strong management skills. So this is really one of our foundational topics, right? Because without public trust and confidence, we can't do what we need to do every day. So we're going to be talking a little bit in the next 75 minutes about things that affect public trust and confidence and maybe how we can counteract some of the negativity that's out there today. So we're going to talk about why it's important that the public has trust and confidence in the judiciary. We're going to talk a little bit about what causes the public to lose their confidence in the judiciary. We're also going to discuss how we determine if there is public trust, if it's going up, if it's going down, what are the trends, and how do we improve that trust and confidence. So we're going to have a lively discussion, I hope. I am looking for feedback because there's a lot going on out there. And there may be some stuff going on in your own court systems that you could bring into this topic, because I'd like to hear from you on how you're handling some of these subject matters. So to begin with, why is the public's perception of the judiciary important? Any thoughts or ideas? Obviously, there's some examples up there, but any ideas as to why we care, right? We're one of the 3 branches of government, so we're kind of We're a given, right? We're here to do what we're going to do, and it doesn't matter necessarily what they think of us. Yes?
I'm from Salt Lake City, and we have a large homeless population that we work with, big outreach programs, and one of the things that comes to mind for me is if our judges don't, or the judiciary doesn't instill trust in the population by action, they won't come to court. They won't come to any of the outreach events or court. We need to have that trust for them to do that.
Absolutely, yeah. So homeless population, right? We serve the public, so we have to have their trust and their faith that we're going to resolve their conflicts. We're going to have their issues taken before an impartial judiciary, and decisions are going to be made, and they're going to receive assistance. So it's important that they have trust to start the process with us. Any other thoughts or ideas? Why should we care? Yes?
If people don't believe in the rule of law, they're not going to follow it. So they have to have trust and belief that the court is, they have to believe what the court's saying in a way.
Absolutely, because think about it. What power do we really have? Do we have the power of arrest? Can we enforce our orders? No. So we actually have to have the trust that those orders have meaning and that there is a rule of law. So without that trust in the judiciary, it's just a piece of paper to them. And why should they follow it? So it's really important that the public trust us, not only for a place to come to resolve their disputes, but also to ensure that they comply with whatever those judicial outcomes are, whether they be something that is for them or against them, that they come out on the other side at least saying, I may not have gotten everything that I wanted, but the process was fair. Any other thoughts? No? Okay, let's go on to, these are two quotes from two former Supreme Court justices. And Thurgood Marshall said, "We must never forget the only real source of power that we judges can tap is the respect of the people." And that goes back to, people respecting a judicial order. Because if they don't respect it, there's no way that they're going to follow it. There's no reason that they would want to. And then Sandra Day O'Connor that said, "The judicial power lies in the force of reason and the willingness of others to listen to those reasons." So again, we have no real authority, no real power other than the trust of the public. So that's why this is such a key topic, I think, particularly in today's day and age. So, what causes the public to lose confidence in the judiciary? And we've got a lot going on right now, and there's a lot of subject matter flying that we're all dealing with. So we're going to talk a little bit about what those challenges are. And you can see a bunch of them up here, and there may be even some that you could bring to the table that I haven't thought of. But I thought that these were the most relevant in today's day and age. So we're going to start with this subject matter, okay? I'm not going to pick sides. I'm just going to say that this is something that clearly has had an effect on the judiciary, particularly in recent times, starting with the election cycle all the way up through, I was watching the news this morning and the judiciary was a topic of conversation yet again. So why is political polarization affecting the judiciary? Why should it? We're a separate branch of government. We have nothing to do with that branch of government, right? We're separate, we're neutral. Any thoughts about why this would affect us?
Because they're painting us as being partisan.
Right. And why should we care? Why should we care if a judge is seen as favoring one party over another?
Because if they're successful, then that leads to the perception that the courts aren't fair, but are just another partisan organization.
Absolutely, right? And then one side is always feeling as if there's a bias, right? So depending on where you sit on that political spectrum, if you view the judiciary through that lens of bipartisanship and judges making decisions based off of political leanings, you're always going to have a segment of the community that feels that the process has been unfair. And that's not what we want. We want them coming in, regardless of political party, coming into the process thinking that this is a completely impartial, not affected by politics in any way process. And they're actually going to look at the rule of law. And they're going to make their decisions based on the facts of the case and how they interpret that law. So unfortunately, this has really kind of bled into the judiciary of late. And also, what other effects could political polarization? I mean, when politicians start to bring in questions about judicial decisions, right? That also has a significant effect. So when you have political figures questioning the outcome of a Supreme Court decision or a federal court decision or even a state level position, that causes their constituents to question our role and our independence. So when you have political figures polarizing us, we may not be doing it ourselves, but when they're interpreting these decisions based on their political beliefs, then we lose our independence, not through our own doing, but just through their interpretation, and that can get a little dicey. So how do we counteract that? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. What's some other topics that have been recent? And again, I was talking to my mentor, Jude Del Prior, who's the former TCA in my vicinage, and I said to him as we were talking about the topic, I said, do you want me to go there? And I said, I just feel like it's a relevant topic. And he said, of course, this is affecting us, right? These decisions that have come up in recent years affect how the public views the judiciary. So can somebody name a recent Supreme Court decision that may have affected how the public sees us? Or do we not want to have that discussion based on being live streamed? And yes.
Roe versus Wade.
Yes, the Dobbs decision. So the Dobbs decision actually, and I have statistics here that it showed that the Dobbs decision showed that the trust in the Supreme Court dropped from 68%, meaning 68% of Americans trusted the Supreme Court, to a low of 46% in 2022 following the Dobbs decision. And again, it was a judicial decision. However, that had a significant effect on public trust in our processes. And so what they decide at the Supreme Court level, we have to deal with trickle down. How many of your court users can tell you the difference between a Supreme Court decision and a state court decision? Don't they kind of all lump us in one big ball of judiciary? So when there's a decision that's controversial at that level, we can't avoid the effect. We're all lumped in together. So what's another Supreme Court decision besides Dobbs that has come out of late? Because there's been a few. Yes? The presidential immunity ruling. Yes. And again, that goes back to the political polarization. So it was mentioned that the presidential immunity decision, one side versus the other, right? Depending on your political beliefs, one side saw that as a win, and the other side saw it as a real negative. We're kind of stuck in the middle, right? We're neutral territory, and unfortunately, that further polarized Americans and their trust in the judiciary, depending on which side of the coin they were on. And so we have to deal with responding to that negative reaction from one side versus the other. Is there any other decisions that you can think of? How about the decision about using ethnicity for college admissions? That was another big one, right? Again, significant Supreme Court decision that affects everyone, but goes back to that thinking of how neutral are we? And depending on your beliefs, you saw that as a positive or a negative, and we have to deal with that fallout. So as you can see from the picture here, and I didn't have to search very far for pictures of negative reactions to Supreme Court decisions, but the people have said it's time to change the court, but do they really understand what that means? Yes?
It's not a decision, but what about the ethics issues too?
Yes, I agree. That has, and we'll talk a little bit about that, is judicial impartiality and what the perception is. You know, there's been a lot in the news about judicial ethics, about what is going on behind the scenes, right? And we live in the world of social media, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. There's nothing secret in this world anymore. You think you can fly under the radar Supreme Court can't do it. We as state court administrators can't do it. And it's a big topic. And so we have to be very careful about what we put out there in public because we are going to be judged regardless in our role. So here's a quick graph. This is just from 2 months ago. Okay, literally 2 months ago, this is a Gallup poll, showed that Americans' confidence in the nation's judicial system, and that includes us, that's not just the Supreme Court, has dropped to a record low of 35%. Now, we used to be able to say we were the most trusted branch of government. That scares me. Because without trust, like we talked at the beginning, we have no power. We have no authority. We rely solely on that trust in the nation's public and our court users. And this is an October Annenberg Public Policy Center survey. And that study showed that this is where it showed the drop in the Supreme Court approval ratings from pre-Dobbs decision to post-Dobbs decision. And it's hard to see on this graph, but this is also broken down by party. So depending on which party you tend to lean towards, some saw the trust in the judiciary increase post-Dobbs, and others saw it go down. So again, showing how the judiciary has been politically polarized based on decisions because we are in a very politically polarized environment, right? So I think everything these days tends to have a political polarization or a political bent to it. You could probably, have the egg shortage have a political leaning if you really wanted to go there. So we really have to be proactive in counteracting this negative messaging because it's just going to be applied, I think, to any scenario. So here's another challenge we faced. And while 5 years ago, boy, it seems like a long time, but only yesterday. It's amazing to me that it's been 5 years. But 5 years ago, how did this affect judicial trust and confidence by the public? Any thoughts? How would this affect us? How did the shutdowns affect trust in the judiciary?
I think it depends on how the court system worked. Did they completely shut down or were they kind of hybrid, but just basically more all video?
Yeah, absolutely. But initially, we all shut down, right? Those first couple of weeks, I think we were all in that mad dash of, okay, we're going to go home, we're going to shut down for a week or two, and we'll be back. I think we all had that mentality of, this is a blip on the radar, and we'll be back to our offices real soon. And then when that didn't happen, I think we all had to scramble to figure out how do we make this work. So what happened to those people who had custody issues? What happened to those who needed restraining orders? What happened to our court users who needed that assistance? Like we said, we want them to trust, to have them come to us to resolve their disputes. Just because there was a global pandemic doesn't mean that life stopped. It stopped in some ways, but there was a lot of ways that it didn't. People still lived together. People still had issues at home. People still had neighbor disputes. Probably increased because now we're all home and we're all realizing that I really don't like my neighbor next door because of, they park this way in the driveway or they play their music too loud. So all that stuff was exacerbated because we're already under stress. We're already worried about how this pandemic is going to affect us. And then there's no place for people to go to help them in finding that resolution. So that was definitely a blow to public trust and confidence. But to your point, I think it also was a win because the judiciary showed that we could really turn on a dime and say, hey, we got this. We're going to go virtual. We're going to increase the ability to do things electronically, filings, etc. I don't know about your court systems, but we had talked about the virtual world and electronic filings as we had some case types that were electronically filed, but not 100%. Pandemic hit, that kind of shifted our timeline up like by 5 years. So we had talked about those things as kind of like a future goal, and all of a sudden our future goals became yesterday. So we were able to really move forward and show the public that even though we are being affected by this significant worldwide challenge, we could still handle their disputes and we can make it work. So that was an opportunity for us to improve that trust. How did we do in advertising that, though? As the judiciary, we tend to not toot our own horn, right? Because we're kind of that silent branch of government. We're not out there campaigning for ourselves. We're not out there advertising. We just kind of quietly do what we do, and we expect people to just trust and embrace us and love us because we're the judiciary. We did an awesome job during the pandemic, but how much did we get that message out to the public to say, hey, we're here, and guess what, we're working for you. So I think that's where we also have to think about building public trust and confidence, is how much we get that message out there. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, is about having communication plans, having a media presence, a social media presence particularly, so that when we have significant wins, such as going virtual during the pandemic, we can kind of toot our own horn and say, hey guys, look, we actually had a huge achievement here and we're here for you. How is this affecting us these days?
I would say that would also include, not just the public, but the education for the executive branch, where we weren't even seen as essential. We were just kind of an afterthought.
Absolutely. Because what happened during the pandemic, when vaccines became available and people were either pro-vaccine or not, people were told you have to be vaccinated in order to return to work, and some said I can't. Who did they turn to help make those decisions and really determine how things were going to go forward, right? We need that neutral arbiter to make those decisions and to guide employers back through that process, because let's face it, that was a sticky subject, right? None of us wanted to have that conversation about, are you vaccinated, are you not? We've all been told to, health is your thing, and don't tell your employer about it, and don't tell your managers about it. That's an HR thing, and we steer clear. And all of a sudden, we're having to have people advertise whether they're vaccinated or not in order to return to work. So we really dealt with a lot of difficult subject matter when it came to the pandemic. And I agree with you. I think that the legislative and the executive branch really saw us take up that mantle and really run with it. Because I don't know about you, but I didn't see as much activity on their side and their return to essential services as quickly. I think we really, we brought that back as quickly as possible. Mental health, how is that affecting us these days? Has anybody had issues in their courts with those suffering from mental illness? Has the public said to you, why aren't you helping these people? Right? Why are these people always ending up back in the criminal justice system? They're ill, they need services. They're looking to us to provide those services. Are we service providers? No, but guess what? That's what the public expects of us, right? So mental health courts, that's been a huge topic of late. And we had some discussions about it yesterday. How many in this room have a mental health court system? Oh, great. I know New Jersey is starting. We're kind of on the cusp of beginning that process. But the public expects us to deal with this issue, rightly or wrongly. They want us to keep people out of the criminal justice system. What's another way that mental health is affecting the courts? Think about our own people, right? Our own people have had to deal with a lot. Not just our staff, but our judges. Our judges have faced the challenge of judicial threats. We've had, unfortunately, some judicial deaths across the nation because of political polarization and people taking one side over another. So we do have people that will take their thought process to the extreme. How many of you have had a judge that has expressed concern about their personal safety? Or their family members? That takes a toll. They cannot deal with that without having an effect on their mental health. So I know in New Jersey, there's been a big push, not just for judges, but attorneys in general, about focusing on mental health issues because they tend to be a very stoic group, right? Again, they hear really horrific cases and they have to keep that stoicism on the bench because they've got to maintain that neutrality. They hear horrific stories. But behind the scenes, they're people, and they're just as much affected by these events as you and I. And when their personal safety, the safety of their family members is put at risk, that takes a toll. I've had judges have recently retired and just like, oh, that's one thing I don't have to worry about now, right? They've left the bench and they can kind of breathe a little sigh of relief because they're not there in front of the public every day, and they're not worried about how this is going to appear to one group or another. So unfortunately, it's not just about dealing with the public who are suffering from these issues, but we have our own internal mental health issues as well. All right, so how is this affecting us? Think about it. Yes.
Well, obviously misinformation, disinformation, lying about the courts, lying about, maybe the motivations behind decisions, just really attacks the core of our fairness and impartiality because sometimes things made up of whole cloth, people that have agendas, either personal or political, to sort of make themselves look good by painting the court in a bad light.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
So even on the day-to-day basis, the fake news impacts us. We get the jury scams, somebody saying, hey, you missed jury duty, pay $50, or meet me even on the courthouse steps, and I'll take your money there. We've had that one. We've had fake amnesty programs. So just keeping it for the public on their day-to-day interactions to be able to discern what really is the court and what's a scam is a challenge.
Absolutely. And people are doing this purposefully, right? They are spinning it, like you said, for their own purposes, but it affects us and our ability to do our job fairly and impartially. How are we doing as a judiciary in counteracting misinformation that's out there? It's slow, right? Well, unfortunately, we tend to be reactive in this department rather than proactive, right? As you said, the jury scam. We're reacting to that instead of advertising what jury service is about, getting that knowledge out there. Trying to be a step ahead. Unfortunately, we seem to always be a step behind and reacting to the negativity that comes out. And we all know that there have been moments you think, boy, that would never happen. And then it happens. And I think, wow, how do you anticipate that? Or how do you plan for that? It's a struggle daily. And unfortunately, it seems to be daily these days. But we do have to deal with this. And it affects public perception. And again, this is not what we're about. We are not politicized. We are not doing a bad job. However, public perception is reality. Another one, another hot topic of late. How many of you have had to have discussions in your courthouses about immigration policies just in the past week? Yeah, I know I was in a meeting this last week about the same thing. So how has this affected your courthouse? Give me an example of how this would negatively affect how the public sees the court. Yes, ma'am.
We recently had an increase in litigants not wanting to appear in court for their hearings because of some things that could happen.
Right. We've had conversations about ICE coming into the courthouses, right? And to detain individuals because of their immigration status. And how can somebody who, say, is a domestic violence victim come to us for assistance for a restraining order when they're fearful that based on their status in the United States, right or wrong, I don't know, how you believe that topic is personally, but as the judiciary, we're neutral. And we have to accept that person in and assist them regardless of their immigration status. But if they're fearful about coming into our doors because of what could happen either in the parking lot or inside the halls of our courtrooms, that really puts us, again, perception of the public as we're no longer neutral, right? We're now somebody that could effectuate an arrest, even though we have nothing to do with it. But when they're doing it inside our buildings, it's very hard for the public to see us as neutral. So that's a real big issue. How is this affecting your backlog? Now, again, these are people's lives, so I don't want to take it down to numbers and statistics, but how is the immigration status, immigration policies affecting your case flow? What happens when you have a defendant that's arrested and taken into federal custody? What happens to your case that's on your docket? Where does it go, right? I don't know about you, but I've had some defendants, it's almost like a black hole. Once they're taken into custody, it's real hard to find out where they went, who's holding them, how long they're going to be held, are they still in the country? What happens to the victims of those crimes that may be on your docket? What is their perception of the judiciary when they don't get justice? When they don't have an opportunity to have their case heard? How do you explain it to them? I don't have the defendant and I don't know where they are and I don't know when they're going to be back or if they'll be back. Do you then have a victim whose case is just in limbo? So again, it's about that narrative. How do we communicate with that individual to explain the process? Do we even have an explanation? This is kind of a new thing for us of late. So I'm interested, has anybody come up with a good narrative about how to explain to victims or victims' families about what happens if an immigration arrest has affected their case? We might have to start thinking in those terms. How do we explain that to victims or victims' families? Because they are going to see that as our issue, right? So I want you to start just preparing for those questions and how it's going to affect your docket going forward. Another hot topic. How many of you have had a court that's had a cyber attack? Wow. A lot. In New Jersey, Hoboken is still an issue, I believe. The Hoboken court system was shut down, and they actually had to move services to a completely different municipality because everything was infected. Cybersecurity is a huge issue. Well, pandemic, everything went electronic, right? Great, fabulous. No more paper, no more people at the window. We can all do it online. This is awesome. Well, with that comes this. And now we have to deal with people trying to get into our systems to manipulate them, to fabricate things, right? How many of you deal with electronic signatures, and now that's freaking everybody out because electronic signatures are being questioned. Is it real? Is it not? Am I dating myself when I say, is it real or is it Memorex? How many remember that commercial? Yeah. Okay. See? Speaking to my generation. So cybersecurity, huge issue. How does this affect public trust and confidence? I know it affects us internally because we have to worry about it disrupting our systems, but how does it affect the public's perception of us? Yes?
We have so much information on a person, your address, your social security number, your kids' names. So if we're not able to protect that, it's like, it's scary and it's frightening.
Absolutely, yeah.
Who's got my information?
Yeah, we have sensitive information. And if we're hacked and that gets out there, are people going to want to file their documents with us? Are they going to trust that we can keep their information secure? If you have, say, a malpractice case, you're going to have sensitive health information, medical records. Do you want that getting there on the black web or even the regular web, right? That's a whole other level that we have to be concerned with because that's, again, affecting public trust. They are entrusting us with their vital information, important information, and if it's leaked because we're not actively securing it, then it's a negative against us. And it's actually interesting. The National Center did a survey back in 2022. And even though cybersecurity attacks against judiciary institutions have increased, the number of cybersecurity managers that are hired in the court system has decreased. You would think it would be the opposite. But again, they've shown a decrease in the number of positions that are filled to ensure the security of our information and an increase in attacks. So how the judiciary is confronting this issue is important. How are we handling this? Are we getting ahead of it or are we reacting? So obviously, if we are not hiring people with the expertise and knowledge, because I am not one of them, I can barely open an attachment in an email some days, this is an issue. And I need somebody who is an expert to tell me if the email I received with an attachment is safe to open. Or somebody who sends me a link, is it safe to open? I need somebody who can do that. Yes, ma'am.
In our day-to-day with the employees too, they need to have the training so they can discern when you get that email, hey, I'm out of town, could you pick up the gift cards for me? That it's not a real email.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's scary is I had my trial court administrator said that on a Saturday, we all check our emails, through, whether we're working or we're not. It's just the nature of the beast. She got an email from the assignment judge from their email address. No, you check the email to see if there's a letter off or if there's an initial. Same exact email address saying, oh, hey, sorry, could you respond to X, Y, and Z? Well, rather than type out an email, she texted the judge and said, Judge, I'm sorry, I just saw your email. And the judge said, what email? They actually looked at it. It was not sent by the judge. It was her exact email address, everything. So people are fishing to see where they can get into our systems. And they're testing the waters constantly. So you're right. How we not only educate ourselves, but our staff is vital to ensuring that our information is kept safe and secure. Civics knowledge. Talked about this the past 2 days as well. If people don't understand our role, they are not going to trust in our abilities to remain neutral. Not only that, they're going to fall victim to what? Fake news, political polarization. All those narratives are going to be really easy to absorb and to digest if they don't understand the foundation of why we're here. So I know that many of you who take ICM courses through the National Center, you know about the iCivics program that Sandra Day O'Connor started because she saw civics knowledge as the fundamental basis, get them in the school systems to understand the three branches of government, to understand why the judiciary plays a role in those three branches. If you take us out of the game, you're going to have two parties just battling it out and nobody there to make that final ruling. So it's really important that we start at that level. How many of you have judge school programs where your judges go into the schools? That's a way to do community outreach, and that's one way to counteract this negative narrative and to build trust and confidence, is to start working in our communities, get that community engagement going. What's another way that we can improve civic knowledge through community engagement? Not just in like grade school where they actually have a civics class. What's another way that we can do that? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Excuse me. In our regional court, we have informational webinars about different areas of the court. So even if you're not necessarily, you may not be involved in probation, but maybe you're interested in what probation is doing with our court system. So things like that. And then we also have a judge school program where judges will go and speak with kids about the rule of law or whatever the American Bar Association's law day theme is for that year.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great way to get the word out there, and we're not shoving it down their throats, right? We're not just forcing our narrative on them, but we're schooling them. Yes, sir.
In Delaware, we've been working aggressively with our law-related education center to get programs into the school about like the courts and the legal system, to bring school groups to the courthouse, to run them through them. Just a lot. We've taken our Supreme Court on the road to do oral arguments at schools. And then we've also been working with programs like mock trial to sort of, again, really engage about civics, the role of the court, and things like that.
All very effective ways of getting civics knowledge out there and getting the importance of the judiciary. How many of you do mock trials in your court systems? I love seeing that. At our bar association has an annual law day dinner, and the mock trial competition winners come to the law day dinner, and they get to sit with the judges and the attorneys from the bar association, and they come all suited up, their suit and ties, and the girls all dressed up, and they really are embracing that environment, and that's our future. I know that I'm in a hiring phase. I feel like I'm in a continuous hiring phase. We've got to be able to get interest in our branch of government, that there is a future and there is a career in the judiciary, and we've got to get them young. We've got to spark that interest. So again, civics knowledge, social media, the bane of our existence. How is this negatively affecting our public confidence in the judiciary? It's a great thing. Instantaneous. Share pictures, you can share news, what I had for dinner last night. I went to the ShopRite, I got this for dinner, and this is what I'm gonna cook. Instantaneous connection with friends. But that instant nature of communication is also a scary thing, right? Disinformation, instant feed. So nobody has to wait for the evening news. Nobody has to wait for the morning newspaper to get their information. Now it's instantaneous. And how much fact checking goes into social media posts, right? It used to be you would trust in, your evening news reporter or the morning paper because you trusted that there was a journalist behind the scenes that was actually vetting the information they were sharing. Now anybody can call themselves a reporter. How many of you have people that come into your courts that say they're a blogger, right? So they're a journalist because they have a blog, never went to journalism school, and have no ideas to what they're reporting on, don't have a background in the law to even discern maybe what's happening in front of them. They're just blogging because it may be a high-profile case or it might be a juicy story that they think might garner some attention. Social media can be a real bane to our existence because we are constantly fighting against that narrative, against the misinformation that's being shared out there. It can also be a tool. How many of you have a social media presence for your court systems out there? You have an Instagram page, a YouTube channel. You have a Twitter account or X, or I kind of think of it like Prince. He went to the symbol and now we're, same thing with Twitter. So again, we can use this to our advantage. Now, obviously, there's a lot more bloggers out there than there are judiciary public information officers, right? So we got a steep hill to climb, but we can certainly utilize this to get the positives out there and to get information out there that we want to share with the public. And again, kind of like back to the pandemic, when we just went about our business and we said, well, this is what we got to do, and we took care of it and we switched to virtual, how much did we really advertise our success? To say to the public, we're here to serve you. So we have to think about maybe coming out of that, and it's a fine line, right? We have to be very careful, but we have to make sure that we are sharing that information about the positives that we have going on, and about mock trial, and about our school visits, our one judge, one school programs. Get that information out there to the community so that that misinformation has some balance. It has some counter information out there. So how do we determine if there's public trust and confidence in the judiciary? We already talked about that Gallup poll. We talked about the Annenberg study. So you can use accountability and court performance measures. These are all tools that are available to you through the National Center. How many of you have ever used a public opinion survey in your courts? What did you think of the outcome? Were you surprised? No? What was the results of your survey? What was like a key topic that jumped out at you as a result?
I'm not thinking of a key topic that jumped out as the result, but I think it validated the things that we already knew were areas that we were experiencing difficulties in. And so we didn't get a lot of surprises out of it, but it really did help us, narrow in on those things that we identified as problems. Things like dissatisfaction with their overall experience and, that kind of stuff.
Has there been any other survey feedback that you've received that you've been able to act on? Have people complained about the timeliness of cases? It takes too long. I feel like I'm here all the time. It takes years. What other? Yes, jury.
And it takes too long. Why are you showing us 1980 movies? and there's nothing here, so it got us to buy books, adult coloring books, things like that.
Oh, those are great ideas, yeah. Because again, not only our court user, our defendants, our litigants, people who come into our jurors, we rely on them. And their experiences are shared out in the community, so they can be our own form of social media. Again, I'm going to date myself, and the ladies in the room might know this more than the men, but do you remember the commercial, and they tell two friends, and so on, and so on? I think it was a hair shampoo? Yes, I don't know what shampoo brand it was, but again, news travels fast. So if they have a negative experience in jury service, you think they're going to tell two friends? And then when that friend gets a notice, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I got to go down there, and it was horrible. There was no parking. They didn't feed me. I sat for hours, and nothing happened. And like you said, I had to watch an old video from the 1980s. So again, every little thing is exacerbated. They will share that information with their friends. And even if their friends haven't been called to jury duty yet, they're going to dread it. Oh, I can't. I don't want that notice to come to me next. So that's an opportunity for you to change that narrative, your jury service. Having things like activities for them to do, to keep them busy, keep them entertained. Making sure your videos are not from, 1972 and bad actors. Making sure that they're relevant and they're timely. And it's hard to keep a group of individuals in a room who don't want to be there, had to take time off from work, in New Jersey being paid $5 a day, and maybe have struggled to find parking. And then they show up to sit and wait. That's a hard sell. Like, yay, look at you doing your civic duty. So you really have to engage them, but that's an opportunity for the judiciary to really build some public trust and confidence. So public opinion surveys. One interesting fact is public opinion surveys has shown that virtual court love, right? People love virtual court. People love not having to go somewhere. People love not having to wait around. People love being able to, be at work, but maybe step away for a few minutes, take care of their matter, and then go back to their daily lives. It's great for people who may have childcare issues, who may be taking care of an elder parent, who may be having mobility challenges themselves. So virtual court is really a positive. So the public really is showing approval for that transition in public opinion surveys. So I see that as continuing to grow. How many of you have had some struggles, whether it be with staff or judges, that not really fans of the whole virtual process? They like the old ways. Yeah. I know it's been a tough sell for me and some of my my judges. And listen, not everybody's technically inclined, right? So when we went to Zoom, I don't know about you, but I had to talk some people through sharing screens and muting and unmuting, and we're dealing with a public that some of whom may not be technically inclined. So it could be a challenge, but there's ways to counteract that and still make it accessible to them. We have tech rooms at the courthouse, so if people still struggle with technology or maybe don't have access to it, they can still come to the courthouse, and we have the availability of a space where they can log in, and we've got people to assist them in participating virtually in their court event. So we're trying to find that balance. Also, access and fairness surveys. So how accessible are your courts? Are people being provided interpreters? I don't know about your court systems, but interpreters are a huge issue. It's difficult to find skilled interpreters. We have telephone interpreting, not always the best level of interpreting, right? I've sat in on some sessions where there have been babies crying in the background of the interpreter, dogs barking, and they're trying to interpret a court case. I've had interpreters who may not understand legal terms. Right? That is a real challenge. So that court user, that person who needs that assistance, how much are they trusting in our process when the interpreter is not able to explain driving while intoxicated or blood alcohol content? All that stuff. These are terms that they may not be familiar with, and they may not be able to translate into another language. So when they're struggling, how much confidence does that individual have in that virtual process? So we have to make sure that we are providing fair and accessible court facilities as well as language abilities. How many of you deal with ADA challenges too? Big time. So we went virtual, but that is great for some people, but not all people. Some people need that in-person event in order to have access to the court systems. So we still have to make sure that not only are we virtually accessible, but that we're accessible in-house as well. So you can actually take a look at accountability and court performance measures and use these tools for yourself to kind of measure where your court's at and to see what kind of service you are providing to the public. If you haven't done a public opinion survey, it's a little scary because you just don't know what you're going to get. Usually people with surveys are not They're brutally honest sometimes. But we actually did a couple of years ago where we had staff outside of courtrooms. And as people were leaving, just ask them, would you mind just taking a moment and filling out this survey? Tell us about your experience. Surveying jurors, tell us about your experience. What can we do better? What can we improve upon? Not everybody wants to volunteer their opinion, and some people just want to get out of there. But this is a great way for us to assess how we're doing. And if we don't ask, we can't improve. And again, these are some other tools that you can use. There's trial court performance standards that are available through the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And then also the National Center for State Courts. They have their core tools. Take a look at these things. It will look at how you are doing as a whole, and you can gauge your responses going forward based on the outcomes. So how do we improve? We've talked a lot about these things the past 2 days. I, for one, really enjoyed Judge Pratt's talk yesterday. She is from the state of New Jersey. She is from a municipal court in New Jersey. And that is who I work with now. And that, I'm going to get on my soapbox, is where the rubber meets the road in New Jersey's judiciary. More people have their one and only encounter with the judiciary at that level, right? Traffic ticket, parking violation. That is where they get their experience. And I say to, excuse me, my staff all the time, I said, that 18-year-old who got their first moving violation and comes to court scared out of their mind, their experience with that person at the window, that judge on the bench, is going to color their view of the judiciary going forward, whether it's with a civil litigation matter, you know, in their 20s or 30s or 50s, whether it's a family matter, they're dealing with a divorce or a child custody. That event at 18 or 17 is going to give them that impression going forward. So it is vital that we not just look at the Supreme Court, the appellate division, the state courts, but that we look at every level of court and we look at the judiciary as a whole and make sure that that experience is fair and just at every level. So procedural justice is really crucial. Now, how many of you deal with high volume courts, small claims, landlord-tenant, municipal level traffic violations? That's a fast moving court docket, right? You've got hundreds sometimes on any given day, and your judges are churning them out, right? They're like, oh, gotta get it done, gotta get it done. It's really hard to be mindful of that individual when you have a docket that large. And I give props to those judges, like Judge Pratt, who actually take the time to recognize an individual and the situation that they're in. That's hard. So that's a narrative that I continually stress with my judges. Some of them buy into it, some of them not so much. But I do continue to preach that narrative because it's important that they understand that this is not just 150 cases on this morning's docket and they've got 4 hours to get through it. And then they've got an afternoon session to worry about. This is 150 cases, 150 lives that they're dealing with. Judicial independence and accountability. How many of you have judges that have social media presence? How many of that social media presence make you nervous? Exactly, right? Listen, we use it to, connect with friends and from high school and family across the country, and it's a tool, and it's a valuable one. We share information. Kids are doing this, and look who graduated, and look who got married, and new grandbabies, and it's a really key factor in our lives today. However, not just judges, but court administrators. We have to be very careful about our social media presence because it can be interpreted as one way or another. If you like a post, how could that be seen by somebody viewing it? Didn't know she leaned that way. So you have to be very careful about judicial independence and accountability. So that is really important to building public trust and confidence. How many of your court systems have a judicial code of conduct? Not just employee, but judicial. That's important, that there's accountability at every level. I, for one, was very surprised when it came out that the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, did not have a judicial code of conduct. When there were questions, I said, wow, you would have thought it would have started there. Again, very important. And it's very important that our judges are very transparent and that they are very neutral in their social media presence. How many of your court staff have mandatory customer service training? Do you have like regular training to talk about how they deal with difficult customers? That's a key role in building that trust. Because like I said, that first experience at the window, in the jury room, on the phone, will lay the foundation for their experience going forward. So if it's a negative at square one, that's their expectation at every stop along the way. So ensuring that our staff have proper customer service training is really key. Again, we talked about accessibility. How easy is it to gain access to our courts? Are they able to gain access virtually? If they struggle, do we have alternatives for them? How many of your court systems have an actual public information officer? It's an actual position that if you get a call from the media, you can direct them to a public information officer. Not too many. Let me tell you, in New Jersey, that's a godsend for me, because if I get a media call, I'm like, ooh, not mine. Here you go. Takes a load off of my back, right? It's so much easier because I don't want to be the one with the quote or the misquote in the paper and having my AJ saying, you said what? And to who? So having a public information officer or a communication plan. How many of you have a communication strategy in place? You talk as administrators about what do you do if? I teach public relations for ICM, and I've talked with a number of different states. And how many remember the trial with Larry Nassar, who is the Michigan coach who worked with the U.S. female Olympic team? How many of you could anticipate having a trial of that magnitude in your court system, and how you would get the word out about what's happening? How would you communicate to the media? Would you have a single point of contact and a plan to handle high-profile cases? Because I'm sure that court system, that was not on their radar, right? Amber Heard, Johnny Depp. Do you really think that courthouse was anticipating people camping out in tents, like days ahead of the hearings, to just get a glimpse of Johnny Depp or Amber Heard? No. Are you thinking of those instances potentially in your future? So think about the potential for those high-profile cases, because how you handle that and what your messaging is can affect public trust and confidence. Community outreach and engagement. We talked a little bit about that. Mock trials, one judge, one school. What's some other forms of community outreach and engagement that we have going on now that you can think of that we've maybe talked about in the past day or so? I know Judge Pratt's program, right? She talked about the community program that she had in Newark, where she was funneling defendants off to services to try and keep them out of that revolving door of the criminal justice system. Do you have any other ideas for community outreach and engagement? I know there's got to be some out there. Yes, ma'am.
Our Supreme Court, I believe it was in 2019, did a town hall where they went to 2 locations in the state and invited the public, the media, and everyone, come ask us any questions.
That's awesome. Also a little scary. I'm going to be honest, because you never know what you're going to get. But again, having that community interaction and the ability to say, we're here and we're a presence in your lives and we want to be a positive presence. How many of you have expungement seminars? Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say on the community outreach, of course, we have the field trips that come over, but at the high school level, we do high school forums. So from the baseline clerk to all the way to the judges and our CEO goes to the schools and we talk. It's also to generate in hopes that they'll come to the judiciary too, for positions local, but we do it. Everybody goes.
That's a really important group to target, right? Because high school kids, they're looking at colleges, they're looking at areas of study that they want to focus on. And getting them interested in the judiciary as a career is really important. And we want them to believe in our core values and have confidence going forward that this is a place that they can do a positive thing for the community. Yes, sir.
So one really innovative thing that we've been doing for years in Delaware, which is very fun, we actually reenact the courtroom scene from Miracle on 34th Street and invite elementary school kids, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, come to the courthouse. It's fantastic. The bar, the judges all enjoy being a part of it. We have a real judge on the stand, real attorneys defending. We have a family court judge who's a dead ringer for Santa Claus. Santa Claus. And that is just great. And we really enjoy the fact that gives all these kids, like, instead of being 18 and having your motor vehicle violation, this is their first experience with the court. Is they came in, they got a show, they got a candy cane, they sang Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And so that's, one of the things that, we're really enjoy doing that. And just as the president of CCPIO, if you don't have a public information officer, let me know. We're always helpful, happy to sort of work with people on doing that. And then one of the high profile trials, we had Dominion Fox come to our court. We have never had more reporters at our courthouse ever. More than 200 media organizations. They filled the plaza in front of the courthouse. They packed our courtrooms. And we did have a plan and survived.
Yeah, and I'm sure that plan came in very handy at that moment. And you want to make sure that you have the identified individuals who's going to respond to this, influx of media requests. You want, your staff to be prepared when they get that call from the reporter. What do you know about X, Y? You don't want that a person answering the phone to give information that maybe shouldn't be given, or to give it in a way that it can be twisted or used in some news article, and then you're trying to counter that. So you really want to make sure that not only do you have a plan in place, but that your staff is aware of how to handle those media requests. But I think that's a great idea. I might steal that. How many of you have a teen court program? Again, another way to get younger people involved in the process, right? Where they can actually serve in the process of meting out justice to their peers, but it actually gets them thinking in terms of why this is important in their lives. And then again, public performance measures and data analysis. I know we've had segments here about how to measure your performance, about statistics. I'm a numbers geek. I like Excel, which is kind of weird. My staff look at me like I'm crazy sometimes. I'm like, oh, there's a spreadsheet for this. I know there is. And they're like, oh, there she goes again. But I kind of like seeing the numbers, and I like to see how things move up and down, and how what I'm doing can affect how those numbers move, because I can see that as a goal, and to me, it's measurable. Not everybody thinks that way, but again, it's a tool that you can use in your media presence when you're saying, hey, we've seen an increase in mediations, right? That we offer this as a service, and people are coming in to use our volunteers and recruitment of volunteers for mediation. There's a lot of ways that you can use data as a positive and not necessarily as a negative. So we'll come back to the Core Champion Achievement Program. This is why we're here, because no matter how long we're in this business, there's always something new to learn, and there's always something that we can learn from somebody else. And I think this is just a way that whether you're at the beginning of your career or near the end of your career, that you can always go back to the foundation of what's important as we work through our day-to-day jobs. I know for me, sometimes I have to just step back when you get in the midst of the crazy to say, wow, okay, wait a minute. This is important. I need to take a deep breath and really think about why I'm here and why this is important. So using the Core Champion Achievement Program is one way to do it. Encourage your staff to get involved. Get them started early, because I know that our training program in New Jersey is awesome, but they can't reach everybody. So encouraging people to look outside of your own training programs, to seek opportunities to learn, and also to network with other professionals is a great opportunity for them to start their early careers. So I want you to just go onto the app if you'd like. You can certainly check off that sheet to acknowledge your presence here at today's course. Do you have any comments or questions for me about public trust and confidence? Is there something that I haven't touched on that you think I should have touched on? Is there a hot topic I missed? I know there's many. I tried to hit all the key ones, but is there something out there that you think I need to add to the next one? Because it just seems like they pop up daily. But I appreciate your time and attention at today's program. Thank you so much. Make sure you fill out the structured response if you are doing the Core Champion Achievement Program. And then thank you so much for your time and attention. And everybody have a safe trip home. I know that there is snow coming, so drive safely, fly home safely, and thank you again.